A note to our listeners before we get started. This story contains references to sexual abuse and suicide. Please listen with care. When you first heard that the government was postponing the eligibility for mental health, what was your reaction to that?
I was a little disappointed because nobody likes being told that something's being delayed. On the other hand, I'm also really glad that they delayed it because the more thought and the more time that they put into ironing out the kinks for this, the less likely it is to be abused. But it's kind of something that I keep tucked in the back of my mind. It's not information I'll ever be able to get rid of. It's kind of like my mind's little holy grail.
I'm Rob Cribb, and this is The Ultimate Choice. In the short time since this podcast launched, the issue of assisted death in Canada has surged back onto the public radar. It's now one of the country's hottest political potatoes.
We begin with a national story. Adults who want to use a mental illness as the sole basis for a legally assisted death will likely have to wait at least another 3 years.
We think that the committee failed to respect its mandate. It failed to accurately represent the weight of witness testimony, and ultimately, it failed to uphold the Charter of Rights of all Canadians.
They created hope for people, and I believe now have dashed it.
Canada's rules for medically assisted dying have expanded quickly since 2016. And in that short time, Canadians have responded dramatically. It turns out Canadians are ending their lives in this way at a dizzying speed. It actually outpaces every other nation in the world, including some that have had these laws in place for decades. Think about that for a moment. And the Canadian government has promised to further expand eligibility to those with mental health conditions. It was first supposed to happen in 2023, then 2024, and now with the issue dividing experts, lawmakers, and the public, the government has pushed back its proposed expansion until 2027. How did we get here? And how did this debate become so fractured and so intense? We talked with some of the top minds in the mental health field. We want you to hear what they believe and what divides them. In order to do that, I'm going to invite you to a dinner party at my place. So stick with me here. You'll come over, you grab a glass of wine, join a group of friends gathered around talking. They span the spectrum of worldviews, lived experiences, political, social leanings. They're all smart and lovely, genuine people. And so everything starts out great. There's small talk, pleasantries. But then the tone of the chatter changes. Hot-button topics come up, sides emerge. And sometimes tempers flare.
My name is Cheryl Rowe. I'm a community psychiatrist, and I work with inner-city patients at shelters and encampments in Toronto.
Dr. Cheryl Rowe has been dealing with requests for assisted death long before it was legal.
Let's start back in the 80s with the AIDS patients that you dealt with. What did you, when you look back on that, what did you learn from treating AIDS patients?
Well, number one, I learned that there was no treatment, right? And so I learned how to be with people when they were dying, and dying some really horrible deaths. And I learned what people's preferences might be around that. The first paper I ever published was called, "Is It Normal to Desire Death?" And that was with hospice patients with cancer in Winnipeg when I was still a resident. And that went into the American Journal of Psychiatry.
And now, decades later, she thinks it's unfair to treat people with mental health challenges differently than patients with physical conditions.
Who am I to say you're suffering? Too bad. You just have to find a way to live like this, you know? I hope there will be treatments. I hope there will be some magic pill that will stop voices or stop suffering, or the government will wake up and give people a decent place to live and you know, money to live and enjoyment. But I can't predict that. And I think it's unfair to say to somebody, chin up, you might get better in 10 years.
As the dinner party host and resident journalist, I pipe up to say that Canadians have widely different views on this. Canadians generally support medically assisted dying. But if you ask 10 Canadians what they think about expanding it to include patients with mental health challenges, only about 3 would support it. Dr. Donna Stewart is a senior scientist at the Toronto General Hospital Research Institute. She sat on the federal expert panel on MAID and mental illness. Donna has a lot of experience with MAID assessments. She says she's done more than 300. She's heard all the concerns about expanding MAID to include mental health patients, but she's confident that it's the right thing to do for those whose psychological suffering is just as real and terrifying as those with physical challenges.
I think that if one looks at the numbers of Canadians who have a diagnosis of mental illness, it's very high.
1 in 5.
Yes. Should that disqualify you from all your rights? Under the Charter, we could not discriminate for disabilities, physical or mental. You have a charter right to be considered. So my position is you have a right to be assessed. Whether you qualify is a much more difficult question. So, you know, when I hear people fear-mongering by saying, you know, we're going to be slaughtering thousands of Canadians with this legislation, I think that this is an unreasonable assumption to be making. I think it's going to be a very small number. And hopefully they're going to be very, very carefully assessed.
Do you have concerns that there is a subjectivity to all of this? There's an elasticity about it that could lead to decisions that are ultimately irresponsible.
Wow. Would that concern me? It sure would. Do I think that's likely? Human nature being what it is? I sure hope not, but it's a danger.
And if that were to happen, given the stakes of this, what we're talking about, it really is truly life and death. If it were to happen even once, let alone dozens of times potentially, isn't there something particularly chilling given the subject matter that we're talking about here?
I think it is concerning. We're not perfect. And there may be errors.
I could talk to these people for hours. But the more I listen, it's clear their profession is totally divided on this stuff.
There hasn't been a slippery slope. We've had a cliff. We've had no slope. We've had a cliff. We're falling off it. We don't know how far we're going to fall. And we have gone in a trajectory that no other country on the planet has gone.
That's Dr. Sonu Gand. He's the head of the psychiatry department at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto.
All of this was unimaginable as recently as, 15 years ago. What do you make of the speed with which we have evolved in this country on this question of medical assistance in dying?
This hasn't happened anywhere else like this on the planet. Personally, I think it's irresponsible. I also think as a Canadian, I'm concerned about what it says about our society. If people really want this to happen, despite knowing the sort of social suffering that's fueling some people's requests, that is concerning to me.
You've taken a very clear and strong position now, specific to the expansion into mental health. You hate it.
I think it's dangerous, and I also think it's not the rationale being presented for the expansion. It will lead us to be providing death to non-dying people for reasons that are not honest. And so that's doubly dangerous. It's dangerous to the person. I think it's dangerous to our social fabric when we're pretending that we're providing death to non-dying people for one reason, and many are actually getting it for a different set of reasons that we choose to ignore.
Sonu sees the sharp upward trend of MAID deaths as a betrayal of the public trust, especially for vulnerable patients who choose assisted death because they can't get the help that they need to make their lives livable. Hearing him say that gives me chills when I think back to Michael's own choice. He was stuck inside his apartment, no elevator, no desire to live in long-term care. He wanted to call the shots for his own death. I asked Sonu what he would do if and when the expansion one day becomes the law.
I think the heart of your question is, if somebody really wanted it for sole mental illness, what would I do? I would not provide it myself. The reason for that is I would not be able to honestly say to that person, I think that your mental illness will never improve. Because what the evidence tells us, I would know that some of my colleagues would think, wrongly, that they can make those assessments. And that they might say to this person, oh yeah, I can predict that you won't get better, that it's irremediable. I'll know that they're flipping a coin.
So you're saying that your profession at this point in its history is still only a 50% flipping a coin in terms of predicting irremediability of disease?
Yes, that's what the evidence shows.
Treating people who wish to die is part of the life of a psychiatrist. So that conversation is not something that's new.
That's Dr. Scott Kim. He's the psychiatrist we visited at the National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C. He's spent years studying international assisted death rates, and he's also counseled a lot of patients with extreme depression.
My primary concern is for them to understand that that feeling of suffering, hopelessness, despair is something real, human. That's the first and foremost important thing that a clinician has to do. And then second is to help them to step back, right? Right now, I've gotten into the boat, okay? And the boat is in this rushing river, that's river of despair, okay? My job at that point is to feel like, okay, they're safer because I'm here with them in the boat. But what we're going to do is we're going to get off the boat. We're going to get on the shore so we can take a look at that rushing water going down the stream. You don't have to be in it. We can step out. You're still depressed. You still somewhere feel so much despair. But as a human being who is able to have this communication and connection with me, we can both think about what it means to step out of the boat, stand on the shore, and think about, in the future, if I'm in that river again like that, how can I manage to climb out? That would be the focus of that session.
I hope you're getting a sense of the range of positions here. But something else emerged from our hours of conversations. And it's not exactly a picture of collegiality. Here's Sonu Gand.
I've taken a significant amount of personal blowback for raising concerns. So I will say that most colleagues have been tremendously supportive. So that's been that's what's allowed me to actually continue this. But it's taken a toll both on me, on my family. They will know what I'm talking about. But from some colleagues who have actually attempted what I legitimately would call academic stifling.
And then Donna Stewart shares her own experience being personally attacked.
It says here that you have been the target of some unpleasant criticism within the psychiatric community.
That's for sure.
Can you talk about it? Come on.
I've got a gag order on me.
What are you talking about? This is Canada. Dr. Stewart, you're a celebrated physician. Why can't you speak your truth? What? I'm reading between the lines here. Let me tell you what I think happened. You have been the target of criticism from colleagues.
From?
Colleagues.
Yes.
At the University of Toronto.
Yes.
Who disagree with your position on the expansion of MAID into mental health.
That's absolutely fine to disagree with me.
So it went beyond collegial criticism.
Yes.
Can you describe it?
My photograph was shown in a grand rounds beside the photographs of the people who invaded the Capitol in the U.S., including the shaman. And a comparison was made between me and the QAnon shaman.
After all the panels and all the hand-wringing, Canadians are now left at an impasse. The rules about mental health eligibility have been kicked down the road some more to 2027. And there will be a federal election in Canada before that, so who knows what's going to happen. But the debate is likely not going to get any less heated or complex or personal.
We're capable of doing this. We're a very sophisticated, intelligent society. We can wrestle difficult ethical and moral issues. We do it all the time. And we just need to have the courage to wrestle this one, to get down to the nitty-gritty, to have these conversations so that there are protections for the medical professionals involved, so that I will have my wishes honored. We can work at this. We can make it happen.
That's coming up on our final episode. I'm Rob Cribb, and this is The Ultimate Choice. This season of The Ultimate Choice is reported by me, Rob Cribb. Written by Suzanne Reber and me, produced by Suzanne Reber and Bruce Edwards, who also mixed and sound designed our show. Allison Leighton Brown composed our theme and original music, and Jasmine L. Kurd designed our artwork. Field recordings by Damian Kearns, Ian Thompson, and Bruce Edwards. Jess Alvarenga and Grant Hill are our associate producers, and Ariana Longley and Genevieve Grant at TVO helped us extend our audience. And additional reporting by Masi Khalidbari, Declan Keogh, and Max Laszlo at the Investigative Journalism Bureau. The Ultimate Choice was created by our executive producer, Suzanne Reber. Our show is a production of TVO Today in collaboration with Piz Gloria Productions, the Investigative Journalism Bureau, and the Toronto Star. Our team at TVO includes Shahriar Tajvidi, managing editor of podcasts and digital video, Lori Few, executive producer of digital, and John Ferry, vice president of programming and content. Thanks to Anne-Marie Owens, editor of the Toronto Star. If you enjoyed listening to The Ultimate Choice and believe in this kind of deeply reported and immersive storytelling, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.